Okay, welcome to our second technical session. This is the track for policy. So hopefully that's what you came to hear. Our first speaker is John Smoyer. He's a licensed professional geologist and manager of the AMD Monitoring, Planning, and Development section for the bituminous coal field in Pennsylvania's AML program, where with 23 years of experience in mining, reclamation, and mine water treatment, he is responsible for the planning of the restoration of AMD-impacted watersheds. He is also one of the instructors for OSM's National Technical Training Program, Passive Treatment, Theory, Design, and Application course. And I'll let him tell you what his presentation's about. So, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, Pennsylvania is about to roll out what is going to be a federal AML AMD Subaward program. So what I'm going to do here is present what we are about to do, and it may or may not be applicable to some other states, but I'm going to go through sort of the how and why we're doing this, what our program is, what are our rules, many of which are federal rules, and then how we're actually going to present the application and our scoring for this. I think everybody at this point knows in November of last year, the IIJA, also known as the bill, was passed. That was a huge, I guess, shot in the arm for Pennsylvania. Here's a quick look at our funding historically through the years up until 2022, with the green being the influx of bill money, okay? So the red has been our AMLR money. The blue stack is our traditional SMECR money. And you can see we've been hovering in the area of around $50 million every year, which compared to a lot of programs is still a lot of money. Well, this is neat. It's advancing itself. But now with the bill, we are going to basically approach about $298 million a year. That's a lot of money. So a quick summary of what each source of funding can be used for. Everything is pretty much the same as it was, with the exception of the items that are highlighted in blue. There's a couple big differences, one of which is the bill opens up priority 3 problems, where before they were not in play. So largely in Pennsylvania, that's AMD. AMD discharges are automatically by SMECR deemed to be priority 3. And then there's some differences. Of course, AMLR can be used for community and economic enhancement, and the other sources of funding cannot be. As that slide says, we're going to need help. We're looking at approximately a 30 to 40% increase in complement in our AML program, but that's a 500% increase in funding. The numbers don't work. So we're going to need people to help us get it out on the street. So there's some things that we had to go through here to figure out, and just being completely above board, we were thinking about some kind of subaward program in Pennsylvania long before the bill came into existence. We were receiving proposals and doing sole source justifications largely for some of our AMLR projects, and our own legal counsel said, you guys got to be really careful in what you're calling a contract versus a subaward. So we had to go back through, and those are the definitions of subrecipient and subaward as defined in 2 CFR 200. And my way of looking at it here, the subaward is basically the pass-through agreement that goes to an entity who is there to help, but they don't directly do the work. It's extending BAMR's authority. And that's the simplest way I think people can think of it. It's just taking BAMR's authority, the ML program's authority, and moving it down one layer. There it is in sort of flow chart mode. We get our AML award from OSM, of course. Our program then passes that money through. We become the pass-through entity. The subaward takes it to a watershed conservation district, whomever. They actually do the reclamation contract to what we traditionally have as a reclamation contractor. So we're just putting one more layer in there, but that layer allows us to branch out to help get a lot of this done. It can be awarded, of course, for AML land reclamation, AMD abatement, treatment, and AMLR, of course, can still be applied for and used. It's got to be it's like SMECRA. It's got to be a coal mine prior to 1977. We have a few kind of key components here on who's eligible. Counties, municipalities, it's almost tailor-made for our county conservation districts, council of governments, municipal authorities, and then all of our NGOs, provided that they are 501c3 nonprofits. Can be used for any component, as we do in our AML program. We divide projects into development, then into design, and then ultimately into what we call contracting or construction. Can be used for any phase of that. We are going to announce separate funding amounts, and there's a good reason that I'm going to get into here very shortly, for O&M, for land reclamation, and then for new AMD projects. And of course, AMLR can be used for any one of those entities, provided that it meets the requirements of the AMLR program. The new AMD money we may have to limit that in the future, and that's really the reason we're differentiating the monetary amounts. So as I'm pointing out here, unless we get some kind of amendment to bill, we have no way to set money back, because bill cannot be used for the AMD set-aside program. So we can build for the next 15 years treatment systems, but what do we do at the end of that 15 years when we can no longer have the money in hand to run them because we haven't been able to put it back? And I'm going to just show that here. Here's kind of where we're at right now with our current AMD treatment plants. And this is all very round numbers as just an example. Over the next 15 years, at our 3% inflation, 3% rate of return, because we can't take this money and invest it in the stock market. So that's basically what we're getting in our program. We're taking, of our $20 million of SMECRA, we set a maximum of 30% back. That's basically $6 million we can put back every year. And we basically run this thing out. There's our uncertainty level, but somewhere in the neighborhood of high 30s, 40 years from the present, we are going to be out of our AMD operations funds, provided that there isn't some kind of amendment or reauthorization or something that allows us to continue. Now, continuing to look at this, let's assume we construct an additional 10 AMD treatment plants in Pennsylvania, which would take it up to about 24 total. Each plant, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $550,000 a year. And then we account for an extra $5 million or so to deal with the O&M of all of our passive systems. And then you take all the other same assumptions, rate of return, uncertainty, and we are out of money in as quickly as 22 years from the present. And then you can consider that 15 years of that you ran on bill. So that's 7 years beyond the life of bill. We can no longer afford to run our AMD plants. Thus, the reason we're saying we may have to limit the amount of AMD projects that we grant out for new AMD. At some point, we cannot continue to build without knowing how in the world we're going to continue to pay for them. So we can buy time. We can continue to run everything on the bill, set a maximum of our AMD set aside back. We should try to go down the road of reclamation first, AMD source abatement where possible, and then stay focused. Don't try to treat all the AMD. Get the ones that matter. That comes down to good watershed restoration plans and assessment, and then make sure that we're doing some proper modeling. But if the STREAM Act or equivalent would pass, that's a game changer for Pennsylvania. If we can now set aside $77 million a year off of bill, so all of our worries are kind of gone as far as taking care of our future AMD liabilities. But our program, we are planning on multiple application rounds per year. We're going to see the first year out here whether we do more than 2 or 3, but hopefully it just evolves into a quarterly program so that we're not sitting around. Applicants, I think, start to get nervous that if I don't apply for it right now, I've got to wait at least a whole nother year to get an application in. I think what that results in are sloppy or poor applications. I think there's some reassurance knowing that, okay, well, I need a little bit more data. I'll take the time. I'm going to get this right and give you the proper information. And I'll apply in 2 months because I know it's going to be open again. We are requiring that we get the landowners locked up. I've seen too many projects get hung up because the landowner backs out at the 11th hour, or we have some issue with them. We can't afford to spend, in some cases, millions of dollars on design to have it shelved because the property owner decides they don't like it. The other stuff, there's going to be no working capital because it's federal dollars. There's no required match, although we'd like to see it. We encourage leveraging of other funds. Everything is going to have to get an ATP, quarterly reporting and financial reports. AMD projects do not have to be in a qualified hydrologic unit because it's not set aside any longer. The federal de minimis rate or indirect costs are 10%, and that's of the subrecipient's cost, not of the total project cost. And Davis-Bacon Act applies. We're going to do our best with compliance with Justice 40. And we're doing the other initiatives, encouraging labor unions, tracking and incentivizing the employees that are or former current coal industry employees. Reclamation first approach. We want to try to get these sources of AMD in particular eliminated if possible. We want to complete our qualified hydrologic units, and we want to make sure we're doing O&M of our critical AMD treatment systems. AMD projects that have significant measurable water quality improvements, that's definitely one of our priorities, and we want AMD projects that have third-party or alternate sources of O&M funding, meaning non-SMECRA or bill originating funds. So somebody's bringing private money to the table, we're all in favor of it. AMD projects must have at least a water year of data, flow and chemistry, and an AMD report. And our high-risk projects in Pennsylvania, we've developed a risk matrix. We're going to get a little bit more lenient with that, provided that somebody can show that they're doing operation and maintenance and actually following up on it. Bidding of work, whoever the subrecipient is, it's got to do something to comply with 2 CFR 200.320. It could be soliciting proposals, but they have to have some kind of procurement process in place. It doesn't have to be totally bidding as the state would know it, but they're going to have to comply with that law. So here's the application in a nutshell. Just here we are, what program. It can be AML, AMD, or AMLR, or all three. We have to get the general AML inventory information. Straight up, that's pretty easy. Locational information, of course, the applicant's information, the site and property owner information. It's got to be an abandoned coal mine, so we got to get the AML eligibility information. So, of course, the name of the mine, when it was last mined, all that kind of information. All these questions, of course, have to be answered properly. The property owner can't have participated or profited. There can't be any outstanding legal responsibility under the law. They need to have figured out how they're going to address Chapter 102 permits and Chapter 105 permits. They need to know whether they've done and completed the PNDI, which in Pennsylvania, that's our Natural Diversity Index. Make sure that there's no endangered bugs or bunnies in our way. They have to have the State Historical Preservation Office clearances. They have to have, of course, read our guidance. It's more of a rhetorical question, but it's reminding them they need to do it. They need to have a year's worth of water monitoring and the AMD report in there. The treatment needs to be cost appropriate and effective as far as what they're proposing. Another sort of rhetorical, but a reminder to them to make sure that you're thinking through this. Are the proposed costs well-defined, reasonable, accurate, and acceptable? That's got to be a yes. Property owners have to be on board and inked, not just a handshake. And the project narrative needs to be pretty clear and concise and explain in detail exactly what they're doing. So we're going to score this thing, and the scoring is based upon just achievements, basically what we would call AML accomplishments. So if they get through it and get an eligible application, they're getting 25 points for that. They need 40 points for it to ultimately be awarded as a project, and I'm here to tell you, you got something majorly wrong with your project if you can't get to 40 points, as you're going to see here in a minute. So as we go through this, and I'm not going to go through and read each question, but you get points for it being within an AMD set-aside funding, qualified hydrologic unit eligible, because we want to complete those. You get points for being in an environmental justice area. Anything that drains to the bay in Pennsylvania always gets extra points. And we go, we'll give them points for being in the Pennsylvania Environmental Good Samaritan. We've had that law on our books for a while, so we encourage that as well. And then here's a list of sort of all of our keywords and AML accomplishments that are in our AML inventory. And we've just created a points awarding system for every one of those that you're going to basically knock off the inventory. So you knock it off the list, you get points as you come down through there, and it just becomes a very straightforward then mathematical formula and totaling as to what your points could be. So you can see, I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot to get to 40 points here. You do a little bit of high wall, you're going to have a project that's going to get funded in Pennsylvania. The AMD end of it, which is basically the priority 3 problems, I have down there highlighted the water problems in gallons per minute. You're going to see that there's not a score there because we've kind of created this matrix for our AMD scoring, meaning that we don't just want to treat any and all AMD and give points for that. It needs to be done in some kind of comprehensive or restoration manner. So the only kind of new terms here that are presented is sort of unmanaged restoration versus managed restoration, and that's really treatment dependent versus something that you've reclaimed. Like if you get major stream miles back by removing a refuse pile from the stream side or out of the middle of the stream, we're going to count that as unmanaged restoration because you fixed the problem. So that's going to get more points. But as it goes down through it, we're just awarding points per mile for the AMD improvements, and it's really not in gallons, but it's in stream miles as to how we want to think of that. And then we gather all the AMLR information that is required there, just the sort of the socioeconomic components, going through each one of them. I'm not going to read them all, but we're awarding points, and that's where, we give sort of incentivized to union laborers, to some of the coal industry employees that are going to be employed or re-employed by the contract. They get points there. But as you can see, it's going to require major coordination with our AML program. I don't think there's any applicant out there who can't come talk to us, and that's kind of the point. It's got to be a combination partnership, our project versus their project, because I don't even think they'll be able to complete the application without talking to our AML program. So our application is going to be online. Pennsylvania already has a series of environmental and economic grant applications out there. We're going to use that same platform that we've used for Growing Greener and for other programs in Pennsylvania. It's an all online application, and basically go to the website, follow through the processes and procedures, and they should be able to apply without too much issue. As I've said, the program, the idea is results oriented. We want to knock out AML and AMD. That's the intent. So the projects are going to be scored based upon what they actually achieve. So when are we going live with this? We are set next week, I hope. It's been a long time coming, but Monday, the 24th, we're going to start to accept applications, and we will accept the first round of applications up through midnight on January 13th, 2023. So questions, discussions. We're about out of time, but